Well, welcome to the channel, everybody, and welcome to Pular Resort over here in Mallorca. Just a big thank you to those guys for allowing me out here to film. It's a little bit of a blustery day, but the shorts are on and the sunglasses are on. Now today I thought we'd talk about driver. Yes, really important club in the bag, and a really important club in the bag for me. And I thought I'd just share with you my little story, because some of you have noticed that I've not actually been using the most recent driver I've been fitted for. I've actually run back to an old driver, the TS3. Now this is my old driver and there is a little bit of a story behind it, but I recently lost a little bit of confidence in my driving with my new TSR2. I actually ran back to my old TSI3 because I felt like I was hitting that pretty good before I moved over to the new TSR2. Now I was away for my brother's birthday. We were out on a little bit of a golf trip and I lent my TS3 driver to a friend of mine, and I just had a hit with it down at St Melly and I absolutely ripped it, fell back in love with it. So I put it straight in the bag. And this is where some of you have actually noticed me going into my old TS3 driver. And I thought today we'd hit some on the golf course here at Pular. I'd give you some numbers of the reasons why I got on so well with that driver and why I've now got the confidence to go back in to my new TSR2. Now the question is, why did I actually lose confidence in the new TSR2 driver that I've recently been fitted for? Well, I actually think it's got something to do with the feel. And I put it down to almost like the shaft. Now, the shaft that I had in the TSR2 was straight out of what I had in the TSI3. I was actually fitted for another shaft, but didn't really get on with that initially. So I went back into an old shaft that I kind of knew a little bit about and could kind of rely on. Well, I started off really well. Started playing a few golf courses, probably got into a bit of wind. The golf courses got a bit tighter and I just started to miss a few of the shots that I would normally, let's say, hit. Therefore, I just started to lose a little bit of confidence. Now, when I lose a little bit of confidence, I will go to the practice ground and have a little look at it. I'll even get some numbers in the studio. But actually going back to older drivers for me, because I tend to like to keep all the drivers that I've had in the past, and I know not everybody's in that position where they can afford to, let's say, keep a driver and not sell on the old one. But for me, I just kept all my old drivers and I ran back to my old TSI3. Straightened me up a little bit, but, and I'll come into the TSI3 in just a moment when we actually hit it out on the golf course. But over a period of time, again, I started going into my old traits with that driver, and that's when I picked up the TS3 and brought that out for a bit more of a test. There's a lot goes on in this brain of mine. So then we have the TSI3. Now this is a driver that I think is probably Titleist's most beautiful looking driver that they've created in a long, long time. Actually, to be fair, the TSR3 is pretty much modeled off of this one as well. So from a beauty point of view, this is lovely. It's slightly smaller in its profiling compared to the TS3 and the TSR2, as you would kind of expect between the 2 and the 3. But this particular model actually worked quite well for me, and I actually put this hazardous smoke shaft in it originally, but this actual head is a little bit lower in the spin. The combination of this shaft and this head, I was just getting massive dippers, and for someone that hits the ball a little bit in the toe, a little bit high and toey, that is something that reduces the spin as well, and therefore low dippers on the golf course when I'm out there playing, and I just felt like I was losing so much spin, so much control. Now I did actually go back to this particular head and I put in a tensai white shaft in it at one stage, and I was using that and it was actually going quite well. I just got the spin up a little bit in the head to get a bit more control over it. But I did run back to this for a little while. But again, I just found that under a little bit of pressure, get it a bit in the toe, even the fact that it's a low spinning head, I just struggled with it a little bit, which is why I then moved into the TS3 to test. on then, why not? Oh, this game. Well, you know what they say, drive for show, putt for dough. Have I introduced you to my new custom Scotty Cameron Newport 2? Never lets me down. And here it is, my TS3 driver. Now this is the driver that I think really advanced Titleist on when it came to getting the ball out there a little bit further, moving on from the 917 into the TS. Now this driver really worked well for me. I, at the time, was getting more ball speed, I was getting good amounts of spin, good amount of control with it. The shaft in it is the exact same shaft, the Hazardous Smoke 6.0, and the head just worked really well. It's slightly bigger in its footprint compared to what I see in the TSI 3, actually very similar to what we see in the TSR2, which is slightly bigger, but that leading edge just looks a lot squarer to me, which basically gives me a lot of confidence when I set up over the ball, which is why I decided to actually have a go with it again, put it in the bag, see if I could build some confidence back, which might get me back in to the TSR2, because the TSR2 does give me just that little bit more ball speed. And then finally the TSR2, the driver I've most recently been fit for. Now why did I end up in a number 2 when I've been in number 3s previously? Well, actually probably I was better off suited in the number 2 because it would improve my spin numbers, giving me a little bit more control. This particular driver just gives me so much more confidence behind the ball because it's bigger in its profile, which I actually really like. Now the shape on this head is very similar to the TSI3, but just bigger, which is why I felt that the numbers that I got from it and the profile of the driver just suited my game. Now when it comes to drivers and the testing that I've done over, let's say, the last 6 years, so let's say 3 generations of driver, certainly for me in the Titleist, what I've noticed is an improvement of ball speed, but also kind of a messing around with spin. And what the companies are trying to do is they're trying to give us maximum ball speed, but maintain a good amount of spin to keep the ball in the air long enough that you can keep it carrying out there a little bit further. And obviously the spin number depends on your launch and depends on how much ball speed you can put into the ball. Now, what I've seen with the TS is I saw a driver that had improvements in ball speed, and then they got the spin up maybe just a little bit, sometimes a little bit too high. And then when you move into the TSI range, your ball speed went up again, but your spin numbers came down, and therefore I would, let's say, lose a little bit of control, which I talked about. Then when you go into the TSR range, I've seen that the ball speed has maintained or improved slightly, but what they're trying to do on generation to generation is improve that ball speed across the face, which is really important because that's going to help with off-centered strikes. Now, with all that information, let's just have a little look at the numbers that I got from all 3 drivers in the studio. So let's work up through these drivers with the categories. Ball speed off the club face with the TS3, 151.5 mile an hour. Compare that to the TSI3, we've got 151.9 mile an hour. And then when you move into the TSR2, I'm getting 153.9 mile an hour. So you can see there throughout the generations, I'm progressively just getting a little bit hotter off that club face. If we look at launch, 13.3, 13.6 and 13.4, so really nothing in it, but when you get a good fitting, that's the type of launch that you should get. Then we move into the spin numbers, and this is actually quite an important one. So TS3, 2,559 revs off the face. Spinning it around 2,500 revs for me is where I can really focus on hitting more fairways. Anything between 2,500 revs and 3,000 revs, I'm going to start to control the ball. I just feel a little bit easier. But when you go into the TSI3, you can see me start to drop off here, 2,131 revs, talking about that earlier where I felt like I was getting these dippers. Well, you can see that I've got one in there at 1800 revs, and that's where you're going to see that ball dipping out of the air a little bit on the golf course. And then you move into the TSR2, I now brought my spin back up again to 2471 revs, so therefore I'm gaining that little bit more control, what I feel like I'm getting a little bit more control on the golf course. Peaking out 35 yards high with the TS3, 33 yards high with the TSI3, and then 36 yards high with that TSR2, so just getting it out there a little bit higher with the new one. Okay, and then total distances in the air, we're getting 256 on the average carry with the TS3, so being slightly shorter than the other two, at 264 with the TSI3, and then 263 with what I'm getting out of my TSR2. So just controlling that ball just maybe a little bit easier with that TS3, which is why I've run back to it for a little bit more confidence. But the combination now that I feel like I've got with my old shaft in that new head, again, I'm getting a little bit more confidence to be able to take it back out onto the golf course, put it into action, and see the good results coming that I'm seeing out on the golf course right now. Now, I need to still put this into competition before I can sort of give it a full test and get the confidence right back there, but I just see that running back to old drivers is not necessarily a bad thing if you run back to a driver that just gives you that more confidence to hit more fairways, then build up again to a better driver, which is going to get you out there just a little bit further. I'd like to hear what you think about that video. You can see now why I've run backwards and forwards between drivers. But down there in the comments, what did you think of that video and what are you doing with your drivers? Don't forget, if you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button and I'll see you again on the next video.